Awesome. 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 So great to see you, Marie.
You too.
Yeah, so like you were just saying before I hit record, it's been 3 years to the day since we've last talked.
Yes, and it's so funny when you put the post out, wanting a conversation. I literally thought about you the day before. Now, it's been years, right? So you know how they say when you think about somebody and then they're going to call you, like it's the same thing.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, yeah, manifesting. Here we go.
Yes.
Yeah, so yeah, well, I feel like I'll just like kind of I would like you to ask me questions. So what would you like to know about what's been going on for the last few years?
Well, so if you wouldn't mind, I would love to kind of go back to 2021 and kind of like where you were at and what I remember from you. And then kind of go from there. Is that okay?
Yeah, sounds great.
So I went through some of my notes and because I remember like I learned a lot from you. You did a lot of calls with the collective. And while we were in the collective, we were also in the Freedom Formula Facilitator training. Um, and then we even did a program together, Aaron's program together. So we did spend a lot of time together, and I have notes from some of your sessions. So I went through and I read my notes, and I just wanted to share a few things that stood out to me because
Mm.
these are things like some I still remember to today, and others when I read them, I was like, oh yeah, that's so good to remember. I need to write that down. So these are the things that stood out to me. So you always talked about a pie chart, you know, how much of your time are you spending thinking about the things you want versus the things you don't want, or even feeling the way you want versus not feeling? You talked about a lot about inner being, obviously, and inner being will guide you through your impulses. Do what you feel you need to do, not what you think you need to do. And your inner being is always guiding you. So it's feeling steps, right? Not thinking steps.
Yeah.
And your inner being is pre-verbal. So I loved that. Your inner being has been with you before you were born, right? So someone must have asked you about shoulds, like I feel like I should do this. And you're like, no, your inner being doesn't use shoulds. That really stood out to me. Oh, this was another great line from you. You know what you need to know when you need to know it. So not knowing it means you don't need to know it. Do you remember saying that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And you were always a proponent of moving to ease and relief from struggle. Like typically when people were getting into the hot seat, it's because they were struggling over something. So that was like always step number one. I love this about worry. Worry is using your imagination to think about something you don't want, right? It could be the same with fear. When following your inner being's path, overwhelm is irrelevant. You just follow your inner being's path. And this last one is all that is isn't all that is without you. And that must have been something about, worthiness someone was asking. So I just wanted to reflect those back to you because your calls meant a lot to me. And I'm sure they meant a lot to everybody who participated. So thank you for those gems.
Well, thank you for the recap. That feels really great. So there's a lot of similarities with where I'm going with things and then fine-tuned adjustments for sure.
Yeah. So from there, like I said, we had our private call with the magic frames. And I know that
Mm.
your influences at the time were, obviously Nick Bros, Belief Tree, but you also had a history of NLP. You had studied NLP, hypnosis, psychocybernetics was a big part, and Bashar, of course, right? Big
Yeah.
influence. And then we did Aaron Lawrence's program together. And then I believe you and she went on to do a program together. And that's about the time where we kind of went different ways.
Mm.
So I would love to hear how everything has evolved since then. I'm sure that's a big story, right? But
Yeah.
I'd love to hear it. So like what happened next?
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So teaming up with Erin, it was like our two things connecting together. She was really focused on being your greatest self, turning into that persona. And then as people did that, resistance would come up. So then where I would come in would help people remove the layers of that. At that time, there was a lot of focus on beliefs, which I still feel is a very key component to all this. And then within all that, I came up with something I was calling the triad solution to everything. I haven't heard you mention that, but essentially it's what you were just covering. There's three main branches to it, right? Part of it is alignment, which is like connectivity to yourself, being in harmony with yourself, your head, heart, gut. I also added like the higher self to that. And so that is the ease and relief journey. When we're feeling the ease and relief and the peace, that is when we're in alignment. That is when we're connected. That is when we get the guidance. So then another part of it is the inner guidance. And that's like how, I mean, well, so it's always sending you information. It's always available, right? So how do we receive and interpret and act upon that? So I made like a little 7-part system. And it's basically when I talk to people, hot seat, there's the sticking points, right? Like, oh, how do I hear it? How do I trust it? How do I act on it? And so it's breaking all that down. And then the third part of the triad, sometimes I call it vibration. Sometimes I was calling it state of being. I feel state of being is probably the most accurate at this point. But it's like who we are, the identity that we are, that then generates the experience. And so, yeah, beliefs matter, but it's also the personality construct that we have. It's also the emotions that are stored within us, which, yeah, from an instantaneous moment to moment perspective, all that can shift. A lot of people aren't doing that though. So then how do you release the emotions and transform the inner work and shift it? And like you're saying, you were talking about like tuning into the percentage of focus on what you actually desire. Like what happens when that's not something that you can actually do? Right? Like so many times people are like, yeah, I know I'm supposed to do that. And when I'm trying, it's not changing. It's almost like someone's thinking my thoughts for me. What's going on? So that whole aspect has been like very well developed into the inner journey and the different inner components that create the resistance there. And then how that expresses outward into the vibration that we are emitting that brings things back. And then the journey of that and the evolution of that. So those are the three main parts, right? So it's alignment, vibration, and inner guidance. And I bring that up a lot. So I feel that's like a really great framework. Like I said, I call it the triad solution everything. So I feel like everything falls into that. And then more recently, I just keep reiterating and refining upon that. Yeah, any questions or comments on that so far?
Yeah, so I guess the question would be, so I'm familiar with your sessions from 3 years ago, right? So how would you say, what's the biggest difference between a session then and a session now with a client?
Ooh, yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. So now so what I found is that when people are having these issues, there's like a couple main things going on, right? So it's the inner journey. So I'm not as focused on beliefs. And so how my expression comes out is I'm holding like a channeled flow state connection to the above, the divine, the higher self. And then I allow that to speak through me. And since I've been exploring this in a lot of different ways, including, like personality and emotions and triggers and all this kind of stuff, that all flows out. So what I found is the most helpful thing is that you go into the depth. Like if it's beliefs and they can shift instantly, then that's really simple. But I find some people, they already know the belief stuff. They're like, no, I already know that, but I still have the problem.
Mhm.
So then it's like, okay, well, what's the feeling on that? So then you can feel into yourself where it is. And then, yeah, okay, you can magic flames and shift things, but what happens when that doesn't, what the problem persists, right? So people is like, oh, I'm doing that, and I'm doing the belief thing, and I'm listening to Abraham Hicks, I'm tuning in, I'm meditating every day. Like, what's going on? Why is there still an issue? And so it's like, okay, yeah, so there might be stored emotions in your body. What if instead of trying to change it, you're just to feel it? And
Mhm.
so maybe there's that part of finding that feeling and feeling that feeling as opposed to trying to change the feeling, because that's implying there's something that should change, which is
Mhm.
not being who we are.
Mhm.
So if you sit and feel, what I then found came up next is then it's like, well, so some people, they think they're feeling feelings, but they're actually avoiding feelings, or maybe the feeling's wrapped in another feeling, right?
Mhm.
Like, oh, this hurts and it's difficult to feel. Well, oh, actually, difficult to feel is the feeling you're feeling, not that it hurts.
Mm.
So, so there's now this layered construct of the inner world that I help people navigate through. And the more recent thing that I found is just the most profound solution to all that is to now connect into, and like I bring it through my own personal experience, but to connect into the multidimensional higher self beings that are all around us and to have allow them in to transform it for us. So when someone says that's
Mm.
hard to feel, it's like, oh, I'm going to connect into a being and this being is going to come in and the being just transforms it. And it's not like I'm thinking of that step by step. It's like I'm in the space of the experience and I'm doing the channeling, and this being arrives. And then I'm asking questions to the other person for them to see if they notice it's there. Sometimes they feel it on their own first. And then when it comes in, it's then to open yourself up. So it's about opening, it's about allowing, it's about receiving. So then the transformation comes in, and then really amazing things happen.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So that's
I
that's how I go about it now.
That's amazing. So when you're telling me about this, I can feel your own trust in your intuition and in your guidance. Like you are so solidly in it. I can feel that. And so you're just allowing it to happen and trusting that it's going to flow through. And that's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah,
that's
yeah. Through
awesome.
like repeat experience, it becomes more and more comfortable, consistent, like certain. And
Yeah.
then I've had so many experiences of being in that deep meditation and that being's there and you're talking to them, or you're doing the channels automatic writing and this thing's communicating and you're like, hey, who are you? And it's like, hey, I'm this guy. Right. It's like, okay, so you could get through meditation, you get through writing, you can get through exogenous substances. You can
Yeah.
also get there through communicating with people because now we're like connecting into it together. So we're
Mm,
raising the vibration together. So the frequency's at the point where they can come in and help when we let them in.
yeah. That's so cool. It just feels so good as I'm listening to you describe that. So, how has this affected your own life?
Well, yeah, I mean, it so so it's affected my own life in like every way. So one of the things I do is like I'm always looking for better methods of doing things. And if something works better, I'm just gonna do that. It's kind of like an NLP principle of
Mm.
do what works, essentially, to be excellent, copy excellent people, model things that work. So it's like, okay, so I'm coming across these experiences of these beings that are helping with everything. And so in my own life, there's been, well, like I said, it's like those issues that just don't go away. It's like I know this law of attraction stuff. I'm doing all these things.
Hmm.
How does this health issue keep coming back? Right. I've
Mm.
listened to all the health experts. I'm doing the nutritional thing. I'm right. What is this? What is this? I know the beliefs. And so it's like, okay, so let's just go deeper into that. And I keep finding more teachers and more things. And so now it's like, well, what if I just know that this is the best thing that can happen? And I feel my way in and I get to that place and I'm there. And when I'm feeling that, I can also connect into the greatness above me, the great light, the higher self, the inner beings, the multidimensional stuff out there. And then hold them together, right? It's like hold the highest state of being I could possibly connect into. And you can do that by moving your consciousness up, column
Mm.
up it, and you connect into higher and higher realms. And when you're there, hold the issue at the same time, perceived issue, and then feel how it shifts when you do that.
Mm.
And there was a while there I really thought someone else had to help me with this. It's like, did I really get to a point where like I have to have another person? And
Mhm.
it's way easier if there is, right? If that person can hold the connection and
Mhm.
they can ask the questions and we can guide them there, then you can have that moment. even if
Right.
you don't know how to get there yourself. Because with meditation, you got to be able to land on it and be there and hold the presence, and then the transmutation occurs. But with a person who's dialed in and they hold that spot for you, you can share their energy, right? You can be on the
Hmm.
frequency together where then the transmutation occurs.
Yeah.
And so I've been getting to the point where it's happening. Like literally when I woke up this morning, I had this dream that this thing shifted and this aspect is gone. I could feel it's gone. Like this thing I was working with, I'm like, did my dream really just like take this out of my system? It feels like yes. So it's
Wow.
like you can get there through your dreams, you get there through your meditations, and it's the easiest when you have someone else who's already been there, and they can hold it for you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's like an exploration where you keep going in, right? It's like, okay, I don't have someone who knows how to relieve this thing. How can I keep going in deeper and have the support of someone else so we can keep navigating through the layers so they can like keep me honest, right? Am I actually feeling that feeling, or am I really feeling a layer of denial and pretending that there isn't anything there?
Yeah.
Like what I found is that the really deep stuff is hidden under those kinds of things, right? Like shame, embarrassment, regret, guilt. Those are hidden under layers of denial and, oh, I can't talk about that. And right. So
Yeah.
if you want to get there, but there's the blind spot in your consciousness because you're not letting yourself see it because that thing in your past that happened when you were a kid where you thought it was a really great defense mechanism to put something that locked the door there, how do you open that door again if you don't even know the door is there?
Yeah. Well, and even if you know if the door's there, it's way too scary to open that door on your own. And that's the beautiful thing about having a facilitator, a coach, a guide, whatever you want to call it. Um, there's something to be said for holding space for somebody, and not only holding space, but also being in this high frequency where you're holding a high level frequency space. Like that is a beautiful thing. And what I hear you saying is that this is a feeling process. This, I never once heard you say, you got to think about this and then think about that. Like there's no thinking involved. It's about moving in, moving towards the scary thing, right? And I've actually been hearing that more and more. Like you have to look at it. You don't run and hide from it. That's closing the door on it, right? You want to open the door and you want to embrace it with open arms. But that's scary to do on your own. So it sounds like you're guiding people through that process. It's like holding someone's hand and saying, you know, on the other side of that door, it's not scary, but I'm going to go with you and together we'll look at it.
Yeah, I love your summary of that. It's beautiful. Yeah, yeah, exactly, right? Because like when the whatever occurred, drama, impact, energy, and that closed, it closed with the emotion that occurred at that time.
Yeah.
And usually, especially with children, it closed with an unconsciousness.
Mhm.
And so we closed it, we have the emotion on it, it's packed away. And so it's like presencing the experience and it's like feeling those feelings, which then allows it to open. And that allows us to then see what's in there under there, which is then the personality, the belief, the feelings. And so if there's too much of a charge, we can feel the feelings like, and like what's funny is a lot of people think they're feeling feelings, but they're not, right? Because if you're thinking you're feeling, you can hear it like people like, oh yeah, I'm angry. It's like you clearly don't sound like you are right now. You're thinking about it,
Yeah.
right? So then when you feel the charge, that gets the dissipation to occur.
Mhm.
And then as that charge gets released, it's easier to be in that place. And then
Mhm.
you're like, yeah, okay, I have this guide who's been through that. And they can be like, okay, so what happens when you feel that? And like, okay, well, this feeling's coming up. This experience is coming up. This memory's coming up. This past life is coming up. This, experience is coming up. And whatever that is, you can feel your way in. And if someone's plugged into the higher self and they're asking the questions, and those questions are allowing them to navigate deeper, and then it brings in the beings at the depth. And that's one of the magic points. Is you go down to the depth where the like perceived issue is, And then the beings can come there. When you hold the dark and the light at the same time, that's the transmutation that transforms it.
Mm. How can you tell? What's the moment when you can tell that transformation happened?
Oh, it's absolutely magical. Yeah, it's I find for people who haven't had those kinds of experiences, it's the most obvious and most magical. Then as you become more familiar with it, it becomes more like, oh yeah, I know this. Oh yeah. And that's actually starts becoming like, oh, this is actually who I am. Oh, this is the me higher self that I am. Oh, it's
Mm.
not actually an external being, and maybe it is, but it's also activating the self, the capital self, or like the ego, the capital ego, like the higher mind blended with the mind. So I'm actually the thing that's perceiving through me. So,
Right.
like, how that usually plays out experientially is the person will start finding themselves in a place where it's like, oh yeah, I'm really feeling this light, and it's like, what's the light doing? It's like, oh, it's like washing my insides. And it's like, oh, what's that feel? It's like, oh, this like rock in my belly that felt like this guilt is getting like pulled out by a hand. And it's like, oh, okay,
Wow.
yeah, keep feeling that, keep feeling that. And that's the thing with feelings is feelings are experiential. So there's that thing where someone's like, oh, yeah, you just got to meditate. You just got to let it go. It's like, what's the feeling of letting go? What's the experience of the occurrence of the weight of the feeling that's being taken out? Like, what is that feeling? And when you feel that feeling, that is the shifting.
Yeah. Wow. I don't think I've heard anybody explain it that tangibly, like it makes sense. And it's like you're putting words to a process that is very hard to put words to.
Yeah, like many thousands of hours of inner work and articulation attempts.
Yes. Yes. Wow. Wow. This sounds pretty incredible. Yeah. Um, what would you say has been the most surprising part of this journey for you?
I feel like the most surprising point at this point is that these multidimensional beings that are like aligned with our higher self are real. They're there. They're tangible. They're feelable. Even people who don't believe in them can experience them. And that they can transform, transmute, transfigure anything about us. And they usually do a better job than I knew they could. And they transform more than I knew could happen.
Wow. And would you say, because now I'm just thinking like personally, like we have our preferences, right? We have the things that we wish and hope for and want. And do those beings always want what we want? Or is it possible that what we think we want is not actually what is in the best interest of
Yeah,
our journey here, let's say?
yeah, I would say all the above. Yeah, so what I've learned is most people have a personality, I would say everybody has like a personality construct that was built based off parents, society, authority, conditioning, relationships, right? So it's like, so most people, when you say, hey, feel that, they, well, most people, I guess, aren't super hyper aware, but how it like plays out is like, well, I'm angry because this person did this thing. And so when I look at them this way and they make that tone of voice, it triggers this part of me that reminds me of my parent that scolded me in that way. And
Mhm.
so I do this thing and I don't do that thing because of this reaction response, right? Because I'm really like guilty and ashamed and afraid that something else is going to happen. But what they might tell you is, oh, I feel fine,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, what's going on there, right?
Mm.
And so it's like that's like the personality construct where you have one part that wants one thing and another part that wants another thing. And maybe there's more than that, but to be simple about it, just two parts, which then makes you compromising with yourself.
Yeah, you just went silent.
Yeah,
There you are.
yeah. Well, fun was weird. So attempting to recap that. So you basically have the two parts, right? And so if one part wants one thing, one part wants another thing, you then have the conflict where you're compromising within yourself, where like, well, I'm going to do this other thing because I think I can achieve that instead of the thing that I actually wanted as a dream as a kid that I don't remember because I stuffed the dream.
Mhm.
I locked it away because it wasn't safe to have it because my parents told me you can't make money doing that. Right. So
Yeah.
then how does that play out? Well, not only am I compromising with myself, well, now I'm compromising with other people. Now I'm compromising with my job. Now I'm compromising with my dreams. Now I'm compromising with my future. So if I go toward the thing I want, is that actually the thing I want? Or is that the conditioned response?
Hmm.
Right. Okay. So from that place, what are we talking about? Like, is that the thing you actually want? Or do I want to go into the most self I can be to be the higher self extension incarnate of me and pursue what the unified version of me actually desires?
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly
And,
what I meant. Yep.
and yeah, they might be the same and they might be different. What I find is the multidimensional beings, they fulfill intent. So if I come in with an intent like this aches, yeah, they might help, right? If I have an intent of I want to express my greatest desire, like I literally had a client, she's like, oh, it feels like there's this metal plate in my throat when I want to express myself. I want to open this business and I'm not doing it. I'm afraid to, and I can't charge people money. When we felt in, and then the presences came, and then she's like, oh, it feels like the metal plate melted, and I can just like express it better. And then I heard from her like a week later, she was having like higher self communication more. And I was like, oh, that's really
Wow.
amazing.
Well, because I
So,
imagine that oh, I'm sorry to cut you
oh
off.
no, go for it. Yeah.
No, I just imagine like through this process, you are raising your vibration. And so as you, as the channeler of these higher vibrations, as the client is acclimating to these higher vibrations, now they're vibrating at a higher level as well. So now they're open to, more solutions, thoughts, ideas, ones that they didn't have access to before.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So one of my perceptions of raising vibration now, and I feel like spiritual teachers say it in different ways, is the highest vibration is being the most self you can be.
Hmm.
Right?
I like
So the
that. Yep.
more you can be your most authentic, highest, unconditionally loving, highest self, highest excitement self, that is the highest vibration. So as you become more of who you are the most, you gain access to the thoughts and feelings and representations that are the most relevant for you, that guides you to the things that you want to experience the most, right? So it all streamlines into a simple thing. Now you mentioned like the vibration goes up. So there's this other thing that I notice is really common, and it's like stretching a capacity, and then
Mm.
it's like the capacity to be there. Because sometimes, especially you meet some amazing person, I met like Bashar, you get the energy boost, meet some like enlightened master or something, you're like, whoa, I get everything in this moment. Like, oh, it's so clear. You walk away from them and you're like, oh, what was that? How do I do that again? Right? So when you're in that state, how do you get there and hold it and feel it and expand it and release the reasons on why you're unable to be there?
Mm.
Right. And that's what I like, like the belief work, belief tree, the emotions. It's like, oh, this shame I'm holding, maybe actually when I was a child and I was more empathetic and I was more in like a theta brainwave state, turned out when my mom was changing my diapers, she was ashamed and I felt that as my own. So I took it in my own feelings and I stored it in my belly. And so this feeling of shame I've been feeling my whole life actually had nothing to do with me. And I didn't know that. And with that
Mm.
awareness, I can actually let it go. Or maybe I don't even know how to do that. And I can invite in a greater presence that can let it go of it for me. It's like, I don't know how to let go of this feeling. It's like, oh, you can just let these beings just take it back to wherever it came from. Right.
Mm.
So that kind of a thing plays out. So it's like stretching the capacity. And part of capacity stretching is going up, right? But you may have noticed, I noticed that if I just do elevating practices all the time, there seems to be like this rubber band effect where I somehow snap down low again. It's like, why, if I'm only doing uplifting practices, why do I keep ending up in the dumps again? And so those are the anchors, those are the beliefs, those are the personality traits, those are the traumas that we didn't present, that we judge ourselves for, that the human experience that like just about everybody has, but we keep it to ourselves thinking no one else did that thing. Right. So it's like when you do the inner work, that's when you're doing the excavation where you're growing the deep roots. So the tree can grow higher. The deeper you go down, the higher you can elevate up.
Mm.
Right. It's like a building foundation.
And then the higher you build up, the deeper you're going to go. So those things will come up. So it's like you feel like, well, this should be working, I should be happy all the time. But no, that's actually when you're allowing those deeper things to come up because you've created that capacity for it.
Yeah, exactly. And that way you said it like, oh, I should be able to. It's like, well, what's the feeling of the should? And you can go into that feeling and pinpoint where it's stored. You could even like, source where that came from. Oh, it's from this experience when I was a child, and then unravel it.
Hmm. Yeah. Wow. This is cool. All right. Let me see what other questions I have for you. um, so was there anything that you had to let go of in order to be able to step into this space?
Everything. Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, okay. So what's really been becoming like extra aware for me is beliefs that I can't, or beliefs that someone else has to, or I need someone's validation to prove that it worked, or I got to talk to this specialist because they have this piece of know-how that I don't know.
Mhm.
So I got to keep, checking in with them to make sure I did it right.
Yes.
Right? So all that kind of points toward this belief in self. And maybe it could be as simple as beliefs, but maybe there's that personality construct, maybe because of that thing that happened when I was a child, I have that victim personality. And so I'm like, oh, woe is me. I'm going to blame other people for the situation I'm in. And that's now taking away my personal empowerment. So I got to let go of the blame. I got to let go of the doubt. I got to let go of the shame. I got to let go of the embarrassment. And I found embarrassment and shame were really tricky because they're I don't want to talk about them. I don't want to bring that up.
Right.
And it was really when we start digging into that, it's like, oh, I'm really embarrassed about things that don't make any sense at all. Right. It's like, oh, I want to eat this and they want to eat that, but I'm too embarrassed to speak up, so I eat what they want to eat. It's like,
Mm.
why am I keeping this feeling inside?
Yeah.
Right. So letting go of all those parts that are not me, and maybe they are me, and in that case it's then integrating all the parts that are me, aligning the parts, getting the parts talking. I found when I was really going into this, I found that my heart and belly didn't talk to each other at all. So my belly wants, right? It's like action, drive, fire, desire, move, right? But the heart is like love, compassion. If they're not talking, then the belly might be pushing towards something that the heart's like, it's like, I don't know. It's like, well, my heart says I really want this, but my belly says I really want that. Like, what do they both want? And
Mm.
then the head's like, yeah, but I'm going to think about all these things instead. Like, wait, I'm like this separated, segregated human. How do I turn all these things on at the same time? Then you start opening the heart. It's like, oh, this hurts a lot. That's why I didn't do this before. This sucks. I just want to cry. We're opening the belly. It's like, oh, I've got all these digestive issues. And why? Oh, why is this happening? Right? Or like opening your mind, and it's like, oh, I got all these questions and doubts and confusion. Is this real? Am I going crazy? What's happening? I got to double check with this other person's. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Wow. You've taken alignment to the next level, really, because it's alignment with, like you said, I'm really just going to be repeating what you said, but alignment with all those pieces and parts of yourself and alignment with your capital S self, right? And it's like accepting who you are, all those little pieces, but then letting go of all that kind of doesn't belong, that you don't need. And that's probably all those like society constructs and conditioning and all of that. Being able to navigate between what to integrate, what to let go, like that's almost the process of aligning with yourself.
Yeah. 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 To give it like a simple word, it's like discrimination, discernment, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
right.
is this a thought? Is this a feeling? Is this aligned with myself, or is this aligned with someone else who told me I have to do it their way because really they wanted me to help them?
Yeah.
Right? So like how do you discern all this?
Mm.
And that comes back to feelings. It comes back to self-awareness, comes back to knowing yourself, and then
Trusting
being
yourself.
absolutely. And that's part of that is being willing with any aspect of yourself that might not actually be you. Are you okay with letting go of it, even though you built a personality and identity around it?
Ah, that's a good one. Yeah, because we want to hang on, the ego wants to hang on to those parts of ourselves.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I spent so much time getting this
Right,
degree
right.
and doing this thing, and I got all these certificates. It's so important.
Yeah.
So now we're clinging to this structure of
Mhm.
persona and beliefs instead of just being who I am. Now
Yeah.
we have justification and judgment and reason, which are now more layers and feelings
Yep.
to navigate through.
So many layers. We're so complex.
Yeah. Yeah. And if
Wow.
you on that note, right, look at children, like toddlers are probably the best for that. Babies, before all the filtering, right? The emotion to expression is instantaneous.
Yeah.
And then if you watch a child grow up and you see where they go, okay, oh, now they're like, not gonna say that. And then you see the layers get piled on little
Yeah.
by little. And then
Yeah.
by the time they have a nice, well-developed emotional body, now you see that it's like, oh, you see the twists and bends and
Yeah.
convolutions, and I'm only going to share this with this person and not with that person, and now I'm hiding from myself.
Yeah. That was my favorite part of working with kids. Like I worked with 10 to 12-year-olds. They were able to still let go of things so quickly. And it
Mm,
always blew my mind, like how quickly they were like, oh, I feel better. Okay, off I go. But yeah, when you become an adult and you have all those years now of all those twists and turns and right add-ons and deletions and whatever, yeah, it's a lot more challenging.
yeah,
Wow.
well, them is like the best teachers. Like we have that capability within ourselves.
Mhm.
And so, what if we took the time to release all the reasons on why we're unable to release things instantly?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, right, right. Because maybe
like,
that's
like,
just a belief that it's harder to do as an adult, right? I mean,
yeah,
yeah,
it might be a well defended belief with a lot of reasons, and you might prune away at it for a little bit to get there.
yeah,
Which actually brings me back to what I found is the most useful use of all this stuff is to have, like you're talking about, like my desires, like am I moving toward the thing? It's like pick a thing that you want to experience, and then if you go for it, that stuff that comes up, now you have a clear target of things to feel, right?
yes,
It's like,
yep,
well, I really want to have a great relationship or a great digestion or, right, whatever it is, right? Lots of money, working on my passion, and it's an expression of something I love that brings me back stuff, brings me back income and friends and whatever, right? So if I'm going toward that and it's like, oh, I get really nauseous and I can't do it. A lot of people just give up and they're like, oh, I guess that's not for me. I can't do it, right? But that's now the belief and the personality and the habit and the pattern and
hmm,
the conditioning, and so it's like what most teachers teach is to just recondition on top of it. It's like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to pump myself up and I'm going to power through. And when I feel good, I'm going to do it. And then how that plays out is like, oh, now am I not good enough? And my shame and my embarrassment now I'm going to pump myself up and I'm going to try even harder. And so you just make more weaves on it instead of let's feel and unravel and deconstruct back to who we are so I can remove all the layers so I could get to the goal. And while my way there, I might realize that it has nothing to do with what I actually wanted, which I can now pick a new target that's
Yeah.
more reflective of my new state of being.
Yeah. Now, does this process also work in the reverse? Let's say someone doesn't really know what they want. How would you navigate that?
Yeah, it actually works really well for that. I would say this is now feeling based, right? It's like, is the feeling I'm feeling now what I want to feel?
Mm,
Okay, yes, no. Okay, if it's a no, then what's the feeling I'd rather feel? But okay, maybe you don't even know that. Well, okay, well, maybe I have all this tension in my throat and I'm really afraid to speak up. And so I start feeling that feeling. Is there a moment where it feels like relief? Or does that relief feel better? Well, now I have something, okay, I'd rather feel more relief. The other thing that's really amazing about being able to connect to the like higher dimensional beings and stuff is they bring their own feelings. And so
mm,
maybe I am like in this part where my heart's closed and I'm afraid and I'm scared and I'm sad and I don't know what to do, but I'm able to connect to that presence that's available. I'm able to acknowledge the feeling of my higher self. I'm able to feel the presence of whatever divine being. Like a lot of people talk about angels. We're like, oh, this angel showed up. It's like, oh, cool. But before that, I actually wasn't sure I believed in angels, but this one's talking to me right now. And so it's like, okay, so then what does that being feel like? It's like, oh, it feels like love. It feels like peace. It feels amazing. It's like, okay, well, feel that. Oh, yeah. Where do you feel that in your body? Oh, wow. It stings in my heart, but something's going on there. It's like, okay, well, feel that amazing angel in your heart at the same time. What happens? It's like, oh, I'm crying now. What's going on? Right. So you can actually have someone else, something else, some other being, the facilitator of the process, hold an energy that you're like, that that energy is the energy I want to feel more of. And so
mm,
the feelings still take you there because feelings are experiential.
yeah.
And so once you experience the feeling of a divine being that is some aspect of you that's come to help you because you invited it in, like that
Wow.
in itself is a transformational experience. People all the time talk about like, oh, I was in jail and then I met God and now I work in, a clinic and I give out free food for people. So one of those experiences changes people's lives forever. And we can bring that forward in every single session.
Wow. Well, you bring up a good point is that everything we want is always for the feeling of it anyway.
Yeah.
So if we could tune into that feeling, it almost doesn't matter what we're going after, just stay in that feeling and every like right and life will just unfold beautifully from that feeling place.
Yeah. And that plays out in my experience. One way that plays out is the feeling I'm holding will have more thoughts that feel the same way. So if I'm in that high elevated divine space, I'll get more thoughts like, oh, the idea to do this. Oh, that's a really great idea. And when I
Yeah.
feel this way, I'm ready, I'm willing, I'm able to act on it.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that's fascinating is when you're in a high enough state of consciousness, all the synchronicities appear.
Yeah.
Even like the Hawkins scale of consciousness talks about that, right? If you're at a high enough level, all of a sudden synchronicities start coming out of nowhere and they represent the feeling too. It's like, oh, where'd this idea come from? Oh, I'm here. Oh, that's amazing. Oh, that's happening. And then, so the capacity, can you hold that? Or do I have the feeling, oh, the other shoe's going to drop and I'm going to fall back in the misery? Maybe I wasn't even thinking that and it happened anyway. And I'm back in the dumps. And it's like, how do I climb back out? And that's that capacity, that's that skill, that's the elevation. And one of the things I find is the easiest, though, is if you keep pushing yourself out, there's something you can change. So you could just be yourself instead of pushing yourself to be yourself.
Hmm. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. Okay. So what I found I did a lot, personal experience, is I'm like, okay, I'm going to meditate. I did the meditating full time, 10 hours a day, more than 3, 5, 10 years, whatever. I've done that. Right. And so what is that? It's like, I gotta work. I gotta do this mantra. I gotta chant this affirmation. I gotta breathe this way. I gotta pull the energy into my brain. I gotta tune into the frequency. And each one is like a step. It's a process. It's an exercise. It's work. So it's like, why am I not able to just be the me that feels that way anyway? And so
Yeah.
that's what points toward the the thing that's in the way, right? The block, the rock, the
Yes.
resistance, the belief, the personality, the habit, the ache, the pain, the energy, the trauma, the emotion, the right? No, the energy center is not opening, the spine's not in alignment, whatever it is, right? So it's like, how do you find that? And who knows what that answer is better than you?
Mm, yeah.
Right? So we all look for the expert that has the
Right.
answer. But
Right.
if I can be in the frequency of the solution and look inside and feel and perceive and acknowledge that depth within myself that I hid away and simultaneously connect to the wisdom and have the wisdom tell me, like an archetype that comes through pretty often is like this sort of truth. It's like, oh yeah, I have a sort of truth. Like, okay, cool. And like numerous people talk about this. It's like an archetype in the space that shows up. Like, okay, what's your sort of truth tell you? It's like, oh, it tells me I can do this. It's like, okay, are you gonna do it? It's like, yeah. It's like, do you have any reasons not to? It's like, oh yeah, actually, there's this not good enough. Like, oh well, when did that show up? My parents told me I wasn't good enough. It's like, okay, well, are they just not feeling good enough and projecting that on you? It's like, I'm not sure. What's your sort of truth say? Oh, it says, yeah, it tells me that's what happened. It's like, well, since their feelings aren't yours, can you let them go? I don't know how. What's the sort of truth say? Oh, give it to the divine light. There is a divine light. I didn't realize that. Here you go.
So cool. Yeah, that's great. Oh my God. Yeah. I I I'm thoroughly enjoying this conversation. A lot of things that you're saying are reflecting back to me things that I have been exploring myself as well. And it's almost like this conversation has been a confirmation of all of those things, right? Of course, it makes sense. All right, so I'll leave you with one more question. So my question is, with where you are now and where you're headed, what are you most excited about moving forward?
Whoa. Yeah, well, I mean, what I, so okay, internally, externally, big picture. Internally, I feel like for a while I feel like this was just a concept. Now I feel like it's experienceable. And I feel like the idea of the pushes and pulls that I am attracted to and drawn to that keep me from being who I am, I feel like it is a finite amount that can be completely worked through. And so it
Mm,
is not an infinite well. There is a finite amount. And when you do enough inner work, you can actually drain the well. And there is a concept called samskara from like Indian Vedic scripts and stuff. And that's the idea that we get like wounds on our etheric or energy body. And
yeah.
so we can mend those. And
Mm,
when the wounds are mended, the karmic pattern no longer repeats. The beliefs can change, the personality can reconstruct. And so I feel I can experience a full expression of self. And I
that's
feel like it's
exciting.
experienceable within, I mean, we'll see, months, years, who knows, less than a decade for sure. Right.
Yeah, that's
Um,
exciting.
yeah, I honestly feel it's right around the corner. But we'll see.
Mm.
I'm open to surprising myself. I'm open to not knowing anything. So internally, I feel like I'm there. And then with the big charges gone, and I'm able to just act on the things that I say I want to do, without the resistance of the limiting and the inner nagging and the emotions and the pains and the angst. So we remove all those obvious charges. So then I feel like if I'm going into a brand new experience and there's a new charge that shows up, sure, I know what to do about it.
Mhm.
Right. And I feel like over time, all that will work itself out as well. And just like simple meditation will be able to negate things. So internally, that's what I feel is the most amazing. Externally, pay it forward. I want to help people with this. I've literally done like 10,000, 15,000 hours of meditation. Like I've literally done like 5,000, 8,000 hours of inner work processes, deconstructing beliefs, blah, 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 blah. And I found that it feels to me like everybody's teaching like one piece of the puzzle or a few pieces of the puzzle. And like, what if we just had the whole map here and the higher self shows us the next step? So I don't have to figure out, is it this belief or is it that? I just keep reconnecting, and
Mhm.
the connection shows me which step, which way, which to go. And then if the beings are there to help, they can help. And if it's my own inner capacities awakening to show me who I am, then that can occur. And so now that I'm experiencing this experientially over and over again, I've helped quite a few people and they're experiencing similar things. Then, yeah, okay, it's like coaching or whatever. Sometimes I feel coaching is not quite the right word for this anymore. Then, like, okay, so yeah, helping people get there and showing people how to connect to their higher self and awaken themselves and align and then be the person they are. Not even want to be. Like remove all the conditioning so you're the person
Yeah.
you love the most, right? You are that
Yeah.
person already. And so to show people that not I'm doing it. So okay, here I'm this far ahead on the path. This is what's worked for me. These are all the things that didn't work, and these are all the parts I can put together, and I can systemize that and structure that and put together and show you. Right. So helping people, like I love that. It's something just feels so good about helping people and being of
Yeah.
service. And then like biggest picture is groups, because what I learned is when these beings come, they actually come for everyone. When
Mm.
one person has a breakthrough, every single person has the opportunity to have the parallel breakthrough, right?
Yeah.
If one person's on a charge releasing that emotion, people with that same charge can feel that too,
Yep.
right? So we can all transmute together. You don't
Mhm.
have to do it one belief at a time. You don't have to do it
Yeah.
one manifestation at a time. You don't have to do like one personality construct and one habit. Like we can evolve the entire being and we can do that in groups. And we can do that through the internet. You don't even have to be there in person.
Yeah.
So then it's been like group programs because like a group call's amazing, but I found for myself it took quite a few months, quite a few years, a lot of time to put all the pieces together. But I feel like I can help someone get all the shortcuts, connect to the frequency and speed them up. Like I can pump this energy into someone just by being myself. And then they can feel like what it's like to feel that within themselves and be themselves and release it. And that can happen on a group scale. So on a group scale, now we have a community where people can share ideas. If someone brings forth some sort of a being or entity or religion or whatever that I've never heard of, and this magical being is even more vast and powerful, it's like, yeah, bring it in. Let's include that. Let's have everyone bask in this energy. And
Yeah.
so then from there, my biggest picture, biggest dream would be like in-person schools, retreats,
Mm.
things, make artificial intelligent, you know, augmented reality thing that like does it for you. I don't know. We'll get there.
And ultimately raising the level of consciousness, right? Like
Yeah.
raising the frequency.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so it's like we're all ships raising together, right? We all bring it
Yeah.
up together.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, like on that note, I have one-on-one offers and group program offers. So yeah, doing it.
Awesome. Awesome. Kent, this has been so magical to talk to you. So good to see you. I love you. You're still in your colorful shirts. You're with a big smile on your face. I always love my time with you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Marie. It's been absolutely amazing. This is super fun. Thank you for sharing your time.
My pleasure.